Hello, everyone. This is D2 Kasui, and I'd like to welcome you to our Virginia Association of Chapters of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated Leadership Academy, our summer series that's done in conjunction with Urban Financial Services Coalition, a professional association of minority financial professionals in the financial services industry. These two organizations have gotten together to host and sponsor a wonderful series on leadership. And specifically, we're focusing on personal leadership. The foundation to leadership success is one's ability to successfully lead themselves. And so when a person finds themselves in a leadership role, and we talk about leadership, we're not just saying formal authority, we're saying that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And so can you influence yourself and can you influence others? And you will find that often when you become a leader and you are a leader, that people want things to stay the way it is. You know, they may have benefited or are benefiting from the way things are, or, they just don't, they got tired, they try to do something and they couldn't change it and they don't want you to try. And so today we're really talking about how do you challenge the status quo, because leaders challenge the status quo because they want the world and their life to be better. And so we think that's an important element, an important skill of leadership. And I'm going to tell you this, the world needs people who are willing to challenge the status quo. We are the benefiters, the beneficiaries of leaders who came before us. And thank God, yes, thank God that they challenged the status quo and made the world better for us so that we can be able to enjoy the benefits that we're enjoying today. So with that, welcome. If you haven't done so already, please throw your name in the chat. Let us know where you are participating from. If you have a link to your LinkedIn profile, go ahead and put your link to your LinkedIn profile so that we'll know who we're networking with. We do have the LinkedIn locksmith on the line today. So I'm sure he's going to be checking out your LinkedIn profile, give you some feedback, and maybe invite you to a LinkedIn locksmith session so you can take your LinkedIn to the next level. But please go ahead and do that in the chat. That would be great. And so with that, I'd like to bring up my colleague, my fraternity brother, my fellow member of the planning team for the Alpha Leadership Academy, the gentleman that all people say is amazing, handsome, and smart. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause for Brother Floyd Jones.
Thank you, Brother Kasui. Thank you for your very kind words. And this has been, I guess, truly a labor of love for all of those on the planning and some of the things that we've done to create the program that you have in front of us. Also, the content that we've been utilizing for now the second year. So, on behalf of the district director, President Fred Scott, who had the vision to bring this forth, I want to just thank you for being here today. Three things I want you to take away and create your own moment. I want you to take away some of the leadership tips that you'll hear from our speaker today, Brother Cox. Take away and incorporate into your development some of the things that you hear and the things that might be shared also. Also, take away from this whole process growth that will allow you to continue to be a more effective leader in your own right, in your own business space, and in your own careers. And last but not least, please be willing to share some of that knowledge to others so they might be able to glean from your network, I guess, some measure that might help them to also be able to grow. So thank you, and have a wonderful time and enjoy the session. Back to you, Brother Kasui.
All right. Thank you so much, Brother Jones. I like that challenge, 3 challenges for all of us to consider, because we don't get up early on a Saturday just for the sake of getting up early on a Saturday. We give up early on a Saturday to be able to hear empowering information and then do something with it. So thank you, Brother Jones. Let's give Brother Jones a big hand clap in the chat. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And so for our icebreaker, in terms of leadership, my icebreaker question to all of you is, in the areas where you are, in the organizations that you are a part of, what is one thing that you would like changed? What is one thing that you would like changed? Go ahead and throw that in the chat. I would invite you to put the one thing that you want changed in the chat. And I'm going to come to Brother Youngblood, if he is in position. I'm going to ask him to share verbally his one thing in any of the many organizations that he belongs to that he would love to have changed. Brother Youngblood.
Yes, sir. Had to get in position. I would say, first of all, Brother Rob YB Youngblood, as D2 referenced me as the LinkedIn locksmith here in Richmond, Virginia, member of the Zeta Delta Lambda chapter, graduate of Virginia Union University. And I would say the one thing that I would want to have changed in any organization is a spirit of apathy. There are people who are members, but then there's people that are workers and people that are leaders. So the key is to get the members to become more engaged so that they can become workers and then leverage the work that they do to impact others around them. So I would say the one thing I would encourage organizations to change is the spirit of apathy and empower people to level up so they can impact whoever's around them in their form of leadership that they're taking on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. LinkedIn Locksmith. That is the LinkedIn Locksmith. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. That was excellent. And I like to thank you for that. The cousin of apathy is cynicism, right? And so we want to encourage people in organizations to deal with cynicism. Cynicism really comes from folks not getting what they want or things that they've tried in the past and they haven't become successful. Then their willingness to keep trying turns into cynicism, right? And cynicism is something that spreads throughout an organization, and great leaders find a way to deal with that. In the chat we have diversity. Can we get more diversity in organizations? And the cousin to diversity is inclusion, right? Can we create environments that are more inclusive, that we give everyone an opportunity to be able to contribute, tap into everyone's ideas, notice folks who are not participating and asking the question why. And when we look around, who's missing and who needs to be a part of the conversation. There are unutilized talent and ability that are left in organizations, that are left in families, that are left in communities. So great point. Other thing Erica Dickerson is saying, development. We need more development in organizations. Stephen, all the way in Ghana, is saying the feeling of ownership from all members of the organization. I heard this thing the other day when they were talking to a group of custodians who worked at NASA. Someone asked them, what do you do? Said, we help put people in space. So when you can create an organization when the custodians feel that their role is not to clean the floors, is that the things that they are doing is part of the organization's ability to put people in space, that is a powerful tool. All right, and then we have Antoinette Jarek said, more shared knowledge. Again, a lot of organizations, people are hogging all of the knowledge. They're keeping that knowledge to themselves or only certain people. So we want to create an environment where it is available to everybody. So thank you all for sharing in the chat. There's some really good stuff there. Thank you, Erica. Consistency on accountability and cease microaggressions. So many of that going on. So, maybe our speaker might touch that. He is very versed in a lot of things in terms of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. So I'd like to bring up to the floor my fraternity brother, my line brother, my front door, my deuce, and very good friend, aside from the fraternity, and an awesome professional, often known as a pencil pusher. Please, let's welcome to the floor my good friend, John Gilroy Stanislaus.
Thank you, Brother Kasui. I do have my pencil in hand. I appreciate that warm welcome from you as usual with my full government name. I thank you in advance. But ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I wish you well and good tidings today. Thank you for joining us this morning. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing this morning's speaker, Mr. Marcus Cox. He's a man of distinction, charisma, character, and of good nature. Marcus holds the position as the Market Regional Director at Petco. Petco is a health and wellness company focused on improving the lives of pets and its partners. His illustrious career as a leader, mentor, and an outspoken advocate for equal rights and justice within the business environment makes him a pristine and vigorous leader as a presenter for today's topic, which is challenging the status quo. His message today is filled with rhetoric from personal and professional experiences. He captures these experiences with suggestions and intellectual reasoning to draw upon your own personal experiences. Preceding his role at Petco, Marcus had held several leadership positions at Starbucks. One of these positions was a senior operations consultation manager on the operations excellence team in operation services. His many experiences at Starbucks led him to lead and write the steps to excellence in business analysis and program solving and food safety for stores in the US and Canada. He was a founding member of the Ops Service and Diversity Workforce. He formulated his work to include and secure 6 internships for historically Black colleges and universities with Starbucks University. This endeavor tells you how he has given back to advance and help future leaders in the workforce. His tenure with Starbucks secured a position as a district manager for licensed stores in North Carolina and upstate South Carolina. He has over 15 years of service in the financial service industry. He served as the market president for Bank of America in Asheville, North Carolina, leading a team of over 110 bankers that were responsible for corporate and financial responsibilities. His work and activity in civic and community affairs is conducive of his commitments. He was the co-chair of the Black Panther Network SSC chapter. He is from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where he graduated from Winston-Salem University with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. Marcus is a family man. He has 4 children and he's married to his lovely wife, Veronica. I can go on about Marcus's achievements and career. However, in these times of lifelong insecurities, I will let Marcus give you a glimpse into corporate America. He will tell you as it is, plain truth without no sugar. His experiences are like his shadow. It is an indelible part of who he is as a leader. Listen to his eloquent words as it may capture some of your own personal experiences. He's a journeyman within the financial and leadership arena. He understands that change is the only constant thing in the business environment. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a man of vision. And I am ebullient to introduce our guest speaker today, Brother Marcus Cox. Brother Cox, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, goodness gracious. I don't know what to do with all of that. I will say this, when I'm getting up to the pearly gates and somebody needs to talk to St. Peter, I know who's going to be my representative. I have a 50-50 shot now. I knew it was going to be rough, but I feel real good about my future now. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, brother. For all of you that don't know, my name is Marcus Cox, and I'm a plain-spoken brother of Alpha Phi Alpha. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm excited to be here today with you. I would tell you, when D2 asked me to talk to you about challenging the status quo, I had to take a step back and reflect and think, Has there been a time that I've challenged the status quo? Has there been a time in my life that I thought that things weren't going well and I could make a difference? And the first thing that came to mind was when I told my mom as a 5-year-old that I was not going to eat those chicken nuggets. And I told her that these chicken nuggets, that they'd be processed and full of fat, would not be beneficial to me developing into a young man. And what I found out, my friends, in speaking to my mom in that way, the hand of peace, the hand of love that quickly came from the front seat to the back seat, entering my face, reminded me that challenging the status quo isn't always the result that you want, but it's all in the delivery. So for you that are here with me, let's start with a disclaimer. And I want to say this to everyone. I share this with you today, not to be tested with your spouse, not to be tested with your significant other, deacon board, mother or father. When we think about challenging the status quo, these examples of courage, these examples of shaking the fabric of how do we do things are coming to you from a corporate base, a place of growth. But I will say this, becoming brave and becoming a master in challenging the status quo, you can practice at home, but I tell you, go slow to go fast. Don't pick the thing that you've been working on in a relationship for most of your life and start this in 30 minutes. You will not be successful. We want you back. We need you as to be a tax-paying contributor to our society. But I would tell you, I do believe in the call and response method of presentation. So I'm going to ask a number of you to come off mute to share with us some of your examples, and then I will thread in my life's experiences to really talk about what does it mean to challenge the status quo. So I would tell you, in the very essence of challenging the status quo, it really comes from offering a different opinion that folks have, or thinking about something in a different way. And how do you do that? How do you present yourself in a way that people hear you, see you, but know that you want to move forward? So, Brother Jones, I'm going to ask you to come off mute. Can you give me an example, or when someone says challenging the status quo, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about that? Brother Jones is making pancakes. I forgot about that. So let's do this. Antoinette, are you there?
I am making
Absolutely.
my smoothie,
Yes. No, this
but
is good stuff.
listening.
So when you think
Challenge
about challenging the status quo, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
being bold and confident in what you're about to deliver or how you're going to deliver that change. So for me, it's being bold.
Mm-hmm. Being bold, right? Being someone who I like to say says the unheard, or says what's silent in the room. When I think about that challenging the status quo, it's, oh, that person, what everybody's thinking, there has to be that person who stands up and says, well, have we thought about it this way? So I'm gonna give you a couple of examples of where I've challenged the status quo and I was right on, spot on. Then I also want to share with you a story of where I challenged the status quo and I fell flat on my face. So earlier I was described, and I had this great role with Bank of America as being a market president. And ultimately, I had the responsibility of growing our P&L. I had a $500 million, P&L. And within 4 years, I grew that to $1.2, $1.3 billion. And I would tell you, in doing that, there were a lot of things that were thrown at me. The CEO at the time, and he's still the CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, brought all the market presidents together to talk about how do we go to market and bring and immerse the Merrill Lynch business coupled with the Bank of America business. And can that be accomplished in rural or community markets? So there was a mindset across the room, because you had leaders in Atlanta, leaders in New York, leaders in San Francisco, that quite frankly were the hub and where all the revenue flowed. And when I say all the revenue, the tremendous amount of revenue that hit our P&Ls. And the thought was, hey, we can keep our leadership to large metro, large commercial markets and really divest or think about the business differently in community markets. Now, from a self-preservation standpoint, being in the community market, I knew that was a bad idea, one. But two, what I've also thought was, have we taken a step back and take a look at the business? What happens if we segment the community business aggregately as a whole? And when we were looking at that, if we took away the community markets in Bank of America at that time, you're essentially taking away the fourth largest bank in the United States. And that fact there was a discerning mechanism in my ability to influence our CEO, our executive leadership team, to give the same resources in the community market. Now, I would tell you, when you're challenging the status quo, Antoinette's exactly right. You have to be bold. It takes boldness to stand up and say, well, I think we're looking at this differently. But there's also an antidote that you have to have as well, and that is facts. What are the facts? What are the facts that you're bringing to this situation to say, hey, have we thought about this? Have you looked at this piece of the puzzle? And I would tell you, anytime that I'm doing that, I come from a place of factual background, but I'm also coming with great humility, because the last thing that you want is to present a differing opinion and come across as brash or crass. So I would tell you, when I had that suggestion, I came up with, hey, well, when I think about my community market, we have three things that distinct us from other places. We have bombs, beer, and barbecue. And that was Fayetteville, North Carolina. And that bombs, beer, and barbecue anecdote kept in Brian Moynihan's mind for the span of the 7 years that I was in that market role. Every time he saw me was bombs, beer, and barbecue. Every time he saw me, he talked about, thank you for stepping out and telling us how we could create this community market plan. And the result of that was my community market, within a 12-month plan, from the 12 community markets that were across the US, went from number 10 to number 1. And at that time, when we won what I would call being the highest growth mechanism inside the community market and metro market, everyone across the company descended upon Asheville, North Carolina, and then was recognized, strangely enough, at NAM, the National African American Museum in Washington, D.C. But that never would have happened without me stepping up and saying, hey, we can't exit this market. They need the same resources. Yes, there might be more cows than people, but under those hooves is delicious opportunity to grow the business. Let me show you how to do that. Let me give you another example of where I fell on my face. So I was with a company, very large company that serves coffee across the world, you know, has great, beautiful green colors. I will not use the name to spare the innocent. But our leaders were thinking, well, how do we have a breakthrough with our partners of color, BIPOC? Because, you know, that's the new verb for us this millennium, is BIPOC. How do we have more BIPOC partners continue to grow and want to come to this organization? And the result of their actions was to create a mentorship program. And I would tell you, there was facts that I gave, and some of those facts were, well, in a mentorship program, and you're talking about a preferred, mature individual with an MBA, PhD, decades of experience, I'm not understanding how a mentorship program will help them feel more included. You know, that mentorship, a mentorship is typically for a young professional that's coming into an organization that needs greater soft skills. When I was being mentored, I remember showing up to a bank event with a business suit on, a tie, looking fly, very professional, but had a Budweiser shirt underneath. And I had somebody pull up to me and say, hey, brother, when you wear a shirt underneath your suit, it needs to be a plain white shirt. And it typically needs to be a full neck collar when you have a tie on. That's mentorship. That's bringing someone that has that unknown or those soft skills that need to be developed. In this large coffee company, where our CEO, Chief Diversity Officer at the time, and many of our executive leaders were thinking, well, if we create a mentorship for African-American professionals at a level of director and above, we could grow the ranks of our BIPOC partners. We could have higher experience scores with our BIPOC partners. And as someone who's, a little long in the tooth, gray on the face, a little salt and pepper on the top now, DT, I know you're jealous of the hair. It's okay. It'll happen to you next time. But I would tell you, I was offended. I allowed my emotion to dictate my challenge to the status quo, because I'm like, hold on, we're degreed. We've led lines of business. We've grown P&Ls. A mentorship program at this particular juncture is not necessarily what is needed. We need sponsorship. Sponsorship in regards to, how do you become comfortable with us? How do you see the value of our bank experience, or our experience at DoorDash, or our experience with Nationwide, or our experience with another coffee company? Not the persona, the face, the melatonin that we're bringing. And I would tell you, I fell flat on my face. That was not received well. And the mentorship program went along. I was always the person, once again, that came in with, hey, okay, I'm glad that you had it. And I would tell you, it did materialize into some great sentiment, but it also left a negative taste in a number of partners' mouths that had melatonin, and was like, well, you know what? We're not being heard. We're not being seen. So what do you take away from that, my dear beloved? I would tell you that you continue to have to show up. You have to continue to have your voice, because in having your voice, you are challenging the status quo. But most importantly, when you're giving those retorts, have them layered with facts. Talk about, well, if we're to go in this direction, this is going to be the result. This is the empirical data, right, Mr. Jones, Brother Jones? This is the data, right? This is the data that supports my decision. Let me tell you, if we do this, or if you think about it this way, this is the tangible result that we've seen based on this McKinsey report. When challenging the status quo, that allows people to hear what you're saying, but also to see that future. Now, by a show of hands, and I know we are in Greek organizations, we have some affiliations in a religious organization. How many people know the brother or sister that challenges the status quo, stands up, says something, but doesn't want to do the work? How many people have seen that person? By a show of hands. Now, in my opinion, it ain't nothing worse than to have somebody stand up and tell me what's wrong, challenge the status quo, and sit back down. We don't have time for that. We have a finite amount of time in our lives to make this world a better place. So in my humble opinion, if you're going to challenge the status quo, be willing and receptive to also do the work. It's great to have the opinion. It's great to have those facts. But if we're not basing that in a collaborative effort, in an effort of, hey, let me show you, let me give you that benefit, that all you're doing is raising hell and not helping the organization move. And I promise I would not curse. I apologize, D2. I know this is on a recorded line, but I would tell you, right? You have to do that work. That work is essential to continuing to have your professional presence seen and heard. Because if you're that dissenting voice, if you're that bold person, always saying, what can we do, and not showcasing how to do it, then you get lost in the crowd, you get left behind. You're the person that people say, well, you know what? They're able to help the organization, but they're all about themselves. You often get questioned, well, why is this person getting promoted in front of me? I'm coming up with the best ideas, but you've not executed anything. Leaders look for people that are contributing, and they look for folks that are making that difference, that are moving forward. So you can have the best idea, you can challenge the status quo, but if you're not putting in, as DJ Khaled would say, the work, if you're not putting in the work, you're just the voice of dissent that's not helping the organization to move on. Now, I would tell you there have been many other ways that I've found to be effective in challenging the status quo. I'll talk to you a little bit about collaboration, doing the work. I'll talk to you a little bit about being empathetic, understanding that they might not know what they know, right? That, hey, mentorship for people with multi-degrees in an organization isn't it, it's sponsorship. But I would tell you, when I have an example, a really good example of how do I challenge the status quo and get people to follow me, get people to believe that there's something more, I do that rooted in empathy. Being an empathetic leader, an empathetic listener, and an empathetic presenter has been the creation that Brene Brown, my soothsayer, my professional development soothsayer, has given me. An empathetic ear, a vulnerable ear, allows you to not only become memorable, but to really bring people in. So let me give you an example of where this came to fruition in a corporate setting. Our CEO, Kevin Johnson at the Bucks, was really going through it when we had our racial strife. Some of you might even heard on the news and the radio that we had an incident where we said that Black Lives Matter, but we did not want Black Lives Matter's pins and rhetoric on shirts because that was a political organization. It was not something that the corporation said, oh, no, Black people don't matter. No, it's like if we open the door of having politically affiliated buttons on our shirts, then that opens the Pandora's box for anyone with a political organization to come in our corporate setting and make people feel like we're divisive or XYZ. Our CEO was looking for advice, guidance, and how do we express ourselves to show, right, that we are that corporation of inclusion, we are that corporation of diversity, but we also want to make sure we future-proof this to protect any reputation brand. So I'm sitting with him and we're having a conversation. And I said, well, look, Kevin, you know what, man, I hear you. I hear you. I understand the notion of Black Lives Matter. Let me tell you, when I hear that, I'm Black, real Black. And I told him that, right? I'm real Black. And when you express that, that makes me feel like I'm being seen. But there also comes a point where we can be right. And as I've heard in this wonderful movie, is the juice worth the squeeze? What does it hurt now, given our stock price, given our reputation brand risk, to have Black Lives Matter on a t-shirt from our Black Partner Network? What is that going to do? We can talk about that and we can talk about the exception. But when you think about the impact of the thousands of partners that are going through this crisis and your voice and the ability to have those three words on a shirt, what is that going to do? And that empathetic ear of understanding the business, that empathetic ear of saying, hey, I hear you. We were able to influence that as a network. I was able to influence that on the stage with Kevin when he was expressing himself. And quite frankly, it started the journey for Starbucks to make Juneteenth a paid holiday across. And that was a big moment for me. I challenged the status quo. I had that empathetic ear. And I would tell you, it's hard. D2 asked me this because he's seen me do it throughout my 20 years. It is very hard to be that person who's brave enough, empathetic enough, courageous enough to say, we might be going on the wrong path. But I would tell you, when you check your ego, when you allow your ego to be removed, and it's not about you, and it's not about the presence or about the future promotion, and you really step back and come from a place of vulnerability and empathy, you're able to help organizations, you're able to help your corporations move in the right way and grow. Now, I'll give you this funny experience that I had, similar background, but also rooted in trying to make the decision. So Ross Brewer, our COO at the time at Starbucks, called me up and said, Marcus, I'm just really trying to understand, when you think about Tamika and Tamika's work with Black Lives Matter and the work that they're doing in the community, how do we continue to echo that work, echo Starbucks sentiment, and how do you see Tamika continue to move the organization? And I was like, well, I remember when they were twins on TV, and that show, like, they had a great show. And I know one of the twins just recently got married, and she's doing a daytime talk show, like The Talk or The Juice. I don't know what her sister's doing. And the CEO said, Marcus, you talking about Tamika Mallory. I'm talking about Tamika, the founder of Black Lives Matter. And I was like, oh, I'm confused. I get my Tamika's confused. And I was able to rebound in that conversation and say, hey, in a vulnerable place, you know what? I know who the president of the NAACP is. I know who the president of the Urban League, but I don't know, as a person of color, the president of Black Lives Matter. That has not been a part of my journey, right? Like, this is new for me. And being vulnerable and challenging the status quo, I had to show her that, no, I thought, man, we talk about Mark at National Urban. I know Mark. Like, no, this was new to me. This was a new learning. And that empathy in that ear allowed Roz to also think, yeah, many people don't even know the organization. So how do we inform people what the organization does, quite frankly, and how we're going to show up differently? And it was through that level of vulnerability that unlocked with Ross that many people were talking about the 3 words, but not the organization. Many people understood what Black Lives Matter meant as a construct, but they didn't understand how the organization represented itself or the work that they did. And that was, once again, a way through my mistake, my humility, my vulnerability, that I was able to influence a change inside the corporate structure in a way that I had never done before. So I would tell you, my beloved, when you think about how do you continue to show up and create moments of change, moments of challenges, the status quo, the 3 things that I want you to keep in mind are empathy, collaboration, and optimism. Those 3 pillars, empathy, collaboration, and optimism, will be the pillars that will allow you and open up the doors for you to challenge the status quo, continue your journey professionally of moving forward, but also bringing others along, not being the squeaky wheel, but being the wheel, the WD-40 on that wheel that moves that trajectory forward. So I know D2 opened this session, or closed the last session, with a epitaph from Kung Fu, be a river, as David Carradine said many, many years ago. I'll leave you with this. Be the person that cares enough to use your voice to make that moment better, to make that day better, to make that organization better, to make that person better. And it's always not going to result in what you think, but you can sleep at night and feel better knowing that you allowed someone a different perspective in order for them to think and move their organization or their work forward. So thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you, D2, for allowing me to share a couple of these stories. And I hope that this resonates with you. and gives you some tools to enable your unlock in challenging the status quo. Brother Kasui.
Thank you, Brother Cox. Let's give Marcus a big round of applause. I have watched Marcus's journey up the corporate ladder, and I've had a front row seat to a lot of those challenging the status quo. And for Marcus's pleasure, I did invite Mr. Bill Bunn to this session. He didn't show up, but I wanted him to know that his vision of what was possible and Marcus's talent and ability was not consumer to what Marcus was actually able to do. And so thank you, Marcus. We appreciate your presentation, great presentation. And so all of you, if you have some questions, you can either raise your hand to ask your question to Mr. Cox, or you can send it in the chat, and I'll take the first question, Marcus. So the first question for you is, as a person, as an experienced person who has challenged the status quo a lot, right, and has been willing to take risk. What do you think is the mindset that people need to develop, to be able to challenge the status quo? I mean, what goes through your mind when you're saying, hey, I'm going to raise my hand, I'm going to raise my voice, I'm going to switch companies, I'm going to do something different? What's the mindset that you think is needed in order to be a good challenger of the status quo?
That's an excellent question. I think the mindset is rooted in what my mother and my grandmother and my father gave me. I'm a king. I am the master of my domain. We say it often, right? I am the master. I am the captain of my life. I am the captain of who I am. I know who I am. And having that sense of self and that sense of I am going to be okay regardless of the outcome is what you need to have most. And that's through humility. That's not through bravado. That's not through I will show you, but it's being very humble to understand that if you're going to challenge and present a dissenting opinion or something that's controversial, that if everybody doesn't like you or everyone doesn't go along, you're going to be okay. And a number of people have fear that permeates, that allows them just to keep going along and not saying anything. Or even worse, getting on a side chat, talking about how much defecation of the bull is going on, versus being bold to say in an open chat, hey, let's take a time out and let's talk about this and think about this differently. But if you don't have true sense of self, you don't understand your worth, or let alone you don't have the what we call nowadays the swag, you'll never do it. You'll falter. You become a false prophet.
Copy that. Excellent point, Marcus. And that's one of the things that when we thought about creating this leadership academy, the first thing that we said we wanted to do is we wanted to focus on personal leadership. Because if we can set the foundation where people can feel comfortable in who they are, understand their superpower, create their personal mission statement, understand the key elements of what makes them very good at leading themselves, then they'll have the foundation to be able to raise their hand and speak, with kings or talk with common folks, because they have that mindset, they have the foundation to help them to be successful. So we see that Brother Youngblood has his hand up. Go ahead, Brother Youngblood.
All right, peace and blessings, Brother Cox. Great presentation. Truly appreciate the stories and anecdotes. My question for you is, as someone who has been labeled as a rebel rouser, I don't have a problem with challenging the status quo, but how do you advise someone like myself who may have that stigma attached to them? How would you advise someone like myself to be productive, even though you're going to, you're known as a person who challenges status quo? Because some people don't value or don't welcome someone who's going to rock the boat or challenge or even encourage new thought. How would you advise someone like myself who's in that position?
Yeah, Brother Youngblood, and I say this because I know you, I've seen your growth, I've seen your family. Some organizations aren't worth what you're bringing. And you have to understand your worth, right? Your value. And guess what? Some people want Ritz-Carlton service, but have a Walmart pocketbook. And if you Ritz-Carlton and you're around a whole bunch of Walmart folks, you never, ever gonna fit in. So understanding your value, understanding what you bring, your intangibles, will allow you to understand how you are continuing to move. And this is the wonderful thing about this world. There are many different places for us to be. Oftentimes, we try to fit in the wrong place because that's the place we think we're supposed to be. But there is a divine purpose in all of us. And when you find the exact location where you're supposed to be, you're not considered a rebel rouser. You're considered a developer. You're considered a leader of people that enables to see into the future to help make organizations better. So I would tell you, Brother Youngblood, look to your left, look to your right, and understand, do the people around me understand my value? Let alone, are they worthy of my value, in my opinion? And that's what D2's saying. Mr. Bill Bunn was not worthy of my vision. He was not worthy of my dissenting opinions. So I had to pack my bags and go somewhere that was worthy of that. And that could be situational sometimes, or that can be in the fabric of wherever organization you're trying to change. I hope that helps. That was an excellent.
No, that was greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Thank you. Right on target. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brother Youngblood, for a powerful question. We're going to throw it to Mr. Denley McIntosh, our good friend from Canada. The floor is yours, Denley, to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, D2, and their brother, and appreciate the work that you're doing, and congrats again on the new little one in your family. To Brother Cox there, I really appreciate the words that you just shared. I think that they really resonate. From my end, I'll give a quick little preamble to the question. From my end here, just kind of put on my camera here, the challenge I find within doing this work, I share similar sentiments as you, figuring out ways to be vulnerable, empathetic, yet be able to call truth, speak truth to power. When we sit down with CEOs, like my wife Kaja and I run a consulting business for D&I, sitting with C-suite leaders. That's the approach that we take, knowing that a lot of leaders are uncomfortable getting in this conversation, and so rather want to delegate it down. The interesting thing about what we've been doing, sharing a similar approach, we've been seeing a lot more traction that way. But here's the challenge for some people in our community that may not understand. They may see it as, why aren't you blowing up the joint? Why aren't you making some kind of, why are you not deconstructing everything and just starting from scratch? And the truth of the matter is that anarchy does not work. History kind of bears that out. And one thing I learned about I had a lecturer invite me in, was my professor asked me to go speak on D&I, anti-racism. And he said to me at the end, white professor, he said, you have the ability to make white people listen to you. And so I learned that sometimes you have to be able to say the message without making make people be comfortable with the message, but not comfortable with the messenger. So my question to you, in your journey, how has that principle, or maybe you have something to add to that, been very important in terms of keeping your North Star and recognizing to folks around you that we're better together than apart, and kind of like a Nelson Mandela approach to leadership.
Well, you didn't say the word. You didn't gave us a good word. If I'm being vulnerable and being really honest, I had this week an unannounced visit from our CEO at Petco to come to Seattle to see what's going on. It was unannounced. He called me 4 hours saying, I'm on a plane. I want to spend 2 days in your market. And he said exactly what you said. He expressed to me that through my leadership, it allowed him to be vulnerable. It allowed him to think about showing up differently. And that was difficult for me to hear because I don't receive praise well. I've never done that before, right? But what I would tell you is my principle of influencership and my principle of being able to make all people feel comfortable and heard is not to be a tornado, but be a cool breeze. And both of those are when a tornado comes in and tears everything up. And you turn around and it's memorable. You look back and everything's blown up, and you can grow from a tornado. You can rebuild from a tornado. But what I have found in my journey, in my influencership, because that's essentially what it is, influencership to help things become better, being a cool breeze that cools things off, that breeze that's very humble in regards to saying, let's go in this direction together, because that's exactly what you're saying. But that cool breeze of wanting more because it puts you in a place of better, not a place of, all right, I got to blow everything up and start over. And people don't listen when you come in what I would call with the verbal assault. When you put people in that verbal assault mode or that tornado mode, they react by sheltering up, they react by ducking, or they react in a visceral way where they miss your message. And I always, from talking to my football coach at Winston-Salem State, Kermit Blunt, all the way to present day talking to Ron Coughlin on yesterday, our CEO at Petco, I've always said I'm going to be that cool breeze that moves people along in the right way, but also in a way that's moving us forward and developing and growing. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, appreciate the cool breeze. It's I'm sure it was a very it was soothing for me. I think soothing for others. I think a third way approach that I hear from you, and that really unites head, heart, and hands to get this work done.
Absolutely. Denley, thank you for sharing. Representing Canada, I see Shirley Chisholm is also on the line, recommend our colleagues and friends in the Canadian market. You know, Marcus has left an indelible imprint on our Canadian folks. Brother Philip Wilkerson, you have your question up.
Yes, thank you so much. I apologize for jumping on and jumping off. You know how it is this morning. I'm always on the go. As a young professional and someone that has taken on, I guess, a rebel and challenging role, I think one of the questions I have is kind of like the knowing your place, you know, in a sense that like with agency and titles, you know, that comes a voice, but like, how do you do it strategically when you're not at the top of the totem pole, maybe the middle of the totem pole? You're still advocating, you still get frustrated, but then at the same time, you know, quote unquote, knowing your place, like when you can speak up and not. So what would you advise to someone such as myself that's kind of in that role of like assessing your agency and assessing when to kind of push a little bit harder or when to kind of like just know your lane or your space for younger professionals where you want to make change happen, but at the same time, you know, you don't want to get fired, you know, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. That wanting not to get fired falls through life. It doesn't matter your age bracket, it matters everything to do with your salary. But Brother Philip, you, or Brother Wilkerson, something that I had said earlier to Brother Youngblood, age in youth is one of the most valuable assets that an organization can have. And honestly, it is one of those inert superpowers that every organization wants. And you have to understand how to leverage your power as a young person on a team and as a person that's moving up, because you get actually discounted and listened to based on your age. And people don't realize that until they start getting long in the tooth like D2. So when you think about that, most people want youth in their organization because they want to understand, how do I connect with this generation, Gen Z? How do I connect with the millennials? But also your utility, as I said earlier, or how you position that is from a position of power. It's the storytelling in regards to landing your position. And what you would do, or what I would suggest, is continuing to understand the journey of the people that you're trying to influence, use their colloquialisms, use their learning and their stories to build the bridge of what you're learning and where you're trying to take the organization. So a great example of that would be, you have someone that's a 25-year partner at a financial firm, and we're now entering this great recession. If you're a young person and never been in a recession, then you should research and understand, when was the last recession? When did that recession look at a dot-com bubble? And be able to ask, so tell me, when you were in the dot-com bubble, what was the impact of your spend? Was it difficult for you to buy a house? That vulnerability of asking that as a young person will put that older person in a place to listen, because you're connecting with them where they are. And then you talk about, well, as a millennial or as a Gen Z person, this is my first recession, but some things that I'm thinking we can do differently are X. Now you've made that connection. But I would tell you, your youth is a superpower, and it's a superpower that dwindles the longer you're in the industry, because there's always young folks coming right behind you. But use it and leverage it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great advice, Marcus, for Brother Wilkerson. Great question. And that is the thing for leaders. There's no leader without no successor. We have a period of time that we're on the job, especially in organizations, in our family, and our responsibility. And I think I got this from John Johnson, is to pass the baton to the next people who are coming behind us, for them to continue to run the race. And then, as communities, we continue to succeed, as organizations, as companies, they continue to become enduring brands. As organizations, they continue to help the next generation. So I know we are not going to be able to get to everyone's question, because we are at the hour. Marcus, before we close out, any final thoughts or things that you would like to share with folks who will be watching this video, or those who are the leaders who are participating, in terms of challenging the status quo as they continue to lead?
Yeah, I would leave you with this. Continue to challenge the status quo, continue to understand who you are. But at the end of the day, bourbon, vodka, cranberry juice are great ways to also self-soothe if it's not going well. It will be okay. Understand that the challenges that we have are first world challenges many times. And many times we're so embroiled in that challenge that we forget humanity, and we forget that tomorrow's the next day. And I say that tongue in cheek. If it's not working for you, step back, have a cup of coffee, have a bourbon if that's your choice, and then tackle the next day as the new day. Because we're here for a purpose, a divine purpose. And if you understand that divine purpose, any of the challenges that you have will flow like water, as D2 said many hours ago. That would be my antidote, D2.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brother Cox. Let's give Marcus a big round of applause for sharing his insights, sharing his knowledge, for being a river. Marcus, thank you for being a river to all of us today. And we promise to take that information and carry it with us as we touch the lives of other folks, not only in our jobs, but the way we touch the lives of people in our organizations and the way we touch the lives of people in our own families. You know, this information is not just information for the workplace and not just for other folks, but this is information that we can use within our own families.